take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, electricity, electricity.
So this is a channel that I have grown to really like. One of my favorite YouTube channels, EB and Flo. And my understanding is I just have a very basic understanding. They make beats, hip hop. I used to be into underground type, whatever you call underground hip hop back in the 90s. I get that same vibe from them, or I don't even know who's all involved with it, but I love the podcast. So let's get into this. This is Lindy. So I wanted to find out, who is this Lindy Lee person? They get into it though. Take a look. If you don't know Ebb and Flow, very good podcast. Let's get into who Lindy Lee is. And she's doing that left the left routine.
Dr. Lindy Lee, who was a former fundraiser for the DNC and the Democratic Party, and then switched sides and has now become a proponent of MAGA. And there's more to her story, and I'll dig into that a little bit later. Generally, the consensus on this woman is that she's not a good faith actor or just not worth paying very much attention to. She's pretty clearly a grifter, just off of the basis of her behavior, doing what she did, switching sides like that. And she has her reasons, and she talks about it in ways that I do think bring up interesting issues about corruption in the Democratic Party. And Cenk and Anna do a decent job of pointing out the fact that, well, she responded to corruption in the Democratic Party by switching to the Republican Party and doing the same thing for them, essentially being an operative and a fundraiser for them, as though there's not corruption that goes on within the GOP. And she also kind of hand waves when it comes to the GOP and says, well, I don't really know about how things go on within the Republican Party. I just know how things go on within the Democratic Party. And that's probably true to the extent that she is not as ingrained in the Republican Party as she was in the Democratic Party. But also, she's an operative. She has switched sides. So she does have a sense of how things operate within that side of the political world. And that's part of what she's talking about in this interview. So she doesn't come off super dislikable. I'll give her that.
I'll disagree with that. I think she does come across as super untrustworthy, dislikable. Let me know if you know anything about Lindy Lee. I'm going to get back to the podcast and I'll give you some context if you don't know who we're talking about. Let's get back to Ebb and Flo, talking about the TYT, interviewing the left grift. Get your grift game on, Lindy Lee.
She comes off relatively normal, but if you really think about what she's saying and put the pieces together, that the math doesn't really add up. And so she has some valid points about the Democratic Party. She has some valid points in terms of just her experience that make sense why somebody would be turned away from a Democratic fundraising or from organizing. And I've talked to plenty of people who feel exactly the same way, but their response was not to join the Republican Party and start propping up MAGA. So I want to talk about this lady. I want to talk about what Cenk and Anna thought they were doing by interviewing her.
Let me interject here a little bit, because there's a lot of this left the left, and I'm going to go to the Republicans. And we know why, though, Ebb and Flow. So again, this is Ebb and Flow, going to react to a TYT interview for the grifter, one of the greatest grifters of all time right now, Lindy Lee. She seems like a Chinese subversive. I don't know why the left is afraid to say that. I don't know, but here's the problem. Bernie Sanders was, I think he's a clown now, but in 2016, the movement was magical, whether it was legit or not, authentic or not. He had a real movement, just like Donald Trump did. It was the exact same thing as MAGA, but on the left. What happened? The Democrat National Committee rigged the primary against him. And in a court of law, they said the DNC is a private company. They can do that. They didn't do anything wrong. Bernie Sanders bent the knee. Maybe he was never really a real person. I don't know. But then the magic was gone. Even for 2020, it wasn't the same. So how do you infiltrate the Democrat Party, Ebb and Flow? And anybody, and I don't have beef with them. I really like their podcast. I'm asking the question legitimately. So if you can't infiltrate the Democrat Party, it's literally impossible. The GOP doesn't have the same super delegates and stuff. I'm not going to get into the inside baseball. I'm not an expert. I don't have it all in front of me. But they don't have this. It's easier to infiltrate the Republican side because Trump did it. If you're going to do it on the Democrat side, it would be with a big name. I'm not condoning these people, just saying like The Rock or somebody like some big name person in entertainment who says Matthew McConaughey or something like that. Just pretend they were for universal health care and everything you want on the left. They would be the ones to infiltrate the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party would never let that happen. Why do you think Kamala Harris got bumped up? Because it's all BS. So you have to convert. That's why Tulsi Gabbard converted. She hasn't changed any of her ideology. She hasn't changed any of her ideology, except she's got way more pro tiny hats, but you have to on the GOP side. I guess that's no small thing. But so my point is, she says, I leave the Democrat Party. Now I cozy up to MAGA because that's the only way I can get power. So what do you want the grifter, even if she's a trash grifter? Let's give her the most, Lindy Lee. Let's give her the most generous interpretation that she's really authentic. You have to convert to MAGA and just convert to MAGA, be like RFKJ and just be like, okay, I'm MAGA, pretend and be yourself. Tulsi, oh, I'm MAGA, and just be yourself. And now Tulsi's director of national security. RFK is, Secretary of Health and Human Services. I was going to say human resources. He's not the HR guy. With his past, that's a good thing. Let's get back to the clip. EB and Flo, let me know what you think about that rant.
And how ultimately it was a misguided choice, but fits neatly into their own sort of flirting with the idea of left the left. I mean, they insist that's not what they're doing in terms of this pivot to in their mind, a more moderate audience. In a lot of people's minds, they're just trying to pivot towards a MAGA audience. But here they are interviewing.
Yes, they're trying to pivot towards a MAGA audience because that's the only way you can get power. Even whether you're authentic or not, the Democrat Party is locked to the Newsoms, the Pritzkers, they let Walsh in a little bit, but his goofy ass is not going to stay. And he was only VP. Your Kamalas, your Bidens, it's only those certain people that are in it.
Viewing a real left the left grifter. I mean, 100%. That is what this woman is doing. And we'll talk a little bit about the reasons why and what exactly her play is. But if they themselves, as of now, are not doing a left-the-left grift, they're certainly gathering information from the people who have. So let me play a couple clips here and then we'll talk about it.
And one thing that I've never said before is something that happened to me over the course of this past decade. I was put on birth control in 2018 because of health issues, and it completely upended my life.
How so?
I really never said this before, but it's really had such a traumatic and tremendous impact on my thinking. I feel like I wasted 5 years of my life because I was on birth control. And when I decided to come off it in May 2023, I felt like I reclaimed my life and realized that conservatives were right about birth control. It completely hijacks your hormones. It makes you extremely anxious. And I would just expect it to just take it without question. I tried to express my concerns to my doctor, but she was living in this liberal ideology where you could just medicate yourself to recovery. But now that I've been off it for 2 years, I feel like I'm a new woman. I finally have full control over my mind, and I'm finally free to be who I am.
So this is classic subversive behavior where you take a truth or something a lot of people think is true. I'm not going to make a claim. I don't know. I'm not an expert there on the birth control. And you use it to kind of say, well, that's what woke me up. It sounds ridiculous to me.
Without being shackled.
So Lindy,
So in this first clip, she mentions, and I just wanted to highlight this because I think it's interesting and I think it illustrates a little bit of this person's background and kind of what exactly are we talking about here. She mentions that birth control, that she was put on birth control by supposedly a liberal doctor, and that caused her all kinds of hormonal troubles and stuff. And I mean, she seems to kind of tie that in with the fact that she was going along with Democratic Party politics, or she kind of hints that getting off of birth control is when she made this political turn because all of a sudden she sees clearly, which is just odd. That's an odd claim. I've never heard somebody connect birth control to their political beliefs in that way. And Anna Kasparian, you know, to her credit, calls her out on this, and they both do a decent job at like trying to follow up with her and ask her questions throughout this interview. I don't really think they got to the bottom of it, and I think that's part of the problem. I don't really know if there is a bottom to this person. I mean, she seems a little bit empty in some way. And I recognize that's a mean thing to say about a person, you know, despite the, obviously, she's politically atrocious in many ways.
Well, I don't have those same problems as Eb and Flo. I think she's disgusting. I think she's a subversive. That means she could be a spy. She could be the next thing. I'm not as kind as Eb and Flo, but I'm a big fan. Let me know if you want to see more Eb and Flo. Go to their channel. If you're into hip hop, they got beats. I don't know if they'll copyright this or what, but if they do, I'll reach out to them and say, hey, I'll promote you guys. This is one of my new favorite channels out here, Eb and Flo. Let me know what you think about Lindy Lee. Do you want to talk about her? Is she worth talking about? I don't know. She's kind of interesting to see someone be like an overt actor and then going all over the place. She went on with Laura Loomer, and then she went on with Young Turks. It is a pretty big thing, because if you're on the left and you want to see Tim Walz rise into power, that ain't going to happen. Not a Tim Walz that would be anything that you want. It would actually be through the MAGA side. You know, John Fetterman cozying up to MAGA. Let me know what you think.
The next clip is ready below. Welcome to After Show Carnage.